Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Thursday, December 10th, 2020. And here are our top stories. The Department of Labor drops off final proxy rules at the Office of Management and Budget, and implications of a potential government shutdown. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Preston Rutledge. He's principal and founder of the Rutledge Policy Group. He's also a former member of the Employee Benefit Security Administration within the Department of Labor. Preston, great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, I like when you're formally dressed up, but I also like this little bit more casual Preston, without the tie. It really fits you. You look very professorial.
Well, thank you. Bit by bit, I'm moving away from my government days of always wearing a suit and tie. So hopefully this can become a permanent feature.
Well, you fit right in with what we're doing on the network. So let's jump in. I know you wanted to talk this morning in our first segment about new proxy rules, new proxy voting rules. What can you tell us here? Because I think you indicated to me it might fit in nicely with the ESG rules as well.
Well, that's true. And as we've spoken in the past, over the summer and into the early fall, the Department of Labor was very active, putting out a number of rules. On the proxy front, that rule was published in proposed form on September 4th, and with a comment period that ended on October 5th. And the reason that's relevant is a little bit of history. Is many years ago, all the way back to the late 80s, there was a question about whether a plan trustee who has control over plan assets, including stock of listed companies, whether that plan trustee had a fiduciary duty to vote the proxies when they came up. And there was actually a question about that. And the Department of Labor pretty clearly said, and it's been a kind of an article of faith for many years, that yes, a trustee has a fiduciary duty to vote a proxy. That had actually become kind of controversial over the years because of, as shareholder activism got more prominent, and you can see where this is sort of like ESG in a little bit. If there's a shareholder activism proposal on climate change or some other social issue, should the trustee be expending plan resources on that? And it kind of all gets back to really not so much about the issue in front of the trustee as far as the proxy proposal. It kind of gets back to, does the proposal affect the value of the plan assets? From the Department of Labor's perspective, under ERISA, the plan participants always come first. That means retirement income security comes first. And when retirement income security is prioritized, plan fiduciaries will be very reluctant to expend resources on any kind of activity that's not reasonably expected to enhance the value of the plan assets. And it's interesting, over the years, in 1994 and again in 2008 and later on, there have been a number of bulletins on this issue, and they've kind of tracked along with the same time with the ESG bulletins we've spoken about in the past. They're separate issues, but they're kind of interrelated. They became most related in 2018 when the Department of Labor put out a field assistance bulletin and discussed both ESG and proxy in the very same bulletin. And then that takes us up to the proposed rule. Whereas in the past, there was this sense that there was a fiduciary mandate to vote proxies. The proposed rule made it clear that there is no fiduciary mandate to always vote proxies. There's also no presumption that if you abstain from voting a proxy, that you have breached your fiduciary duties. What the proposal said, and it is still a proposal, the comment period is closed, but it's not a final rule yet. The proposal, once again, hearkening to the earlier ESG rule, said that the trustee cannot subordinate the interests of the plan participants to non-pecuniary objectives. And that word pecuniary and non-pecuniary keeps coming back. In fact, in the ESG rule, as we've discussed, they don't even use the phrase ESG anymore in the regulatory text. It's pecuniary factors are what you must consider, and non-pecuniary are what you must not consider. So what on the proposal for the proxy, basically what the job of the trustee is to analyze the matter being voted on and determine whether it's going to have an economic effect on what um, the value of the plan asset, and yet that can be a very expensive proposition. The effort that might go into that could actually be more expensive than it's worth to the plan, or at least to the plan asset. That's another theme that's run through the decades of guidance. Cost benefit analysis, yes, or cost benefit analysis, mandatory, prerequisite, not a prerequisite. Where the proposal settles in on that is it encourages the trustee, or it requires the trustee to do a prudent analysis, but it gives them a safe harbor, a place to go if they think that they don't want to expend the resources of the plan and on an uncertain quest to figure out what the value might be to the plan asset. And the safe harbor is the trustee can generally vote, can generally direct the vote to be based on the management recommendations. So if you go with management recommendations, something of a safe harbor, if you put this in your investment and proxy voting policies. You can also limit yourself in advance to voting only on things that are major to the company, like mergers and acquisitions, dissolutions, contested corporate elections, things like that. And you can also, the fiduciary is also empowered to make somewhat of a subjective decision, because they don't spell out precisely the percentages, but they're empowered to make a decision that if our holdings of this company's assets, if our stock in this company is so small in relative to the company itself, and the company the size of the company overall, that any vote we would make would be minuscule in terms of its effect, you can also refrain from voting. So there are these safe harbors, and most people think that most trustees will want to run to those safe harbors, and that does make the proposed rule somewhat controversial, particularly the one that allows the trustee to just, as a safe harbor, to go with the management recommendation. And you can see where that might make shareholder activists uncomfortable. So there were a lot of comments on this, and we don't know how the Department of Labor will respond to all the comments, other than we know that they will respond to the comments.
Yeah, Preston, in terms of, you mentioned this is proposed, or we've gotten comments back, not we, but that the Department of Labor has gotten comments back. In terms of timing, here we are, it's towards the end of December, towards the end of 2020. What's the likelihood that something like this it's not in the Federal Register, which is, according to one of our shows that we did with you, I mean, that is like the Bible. That is where it all becomes enumerated and written down for people to follow. What is the timeline to get this into, once rules get reviewed and finalized, to get into final form?
There's certainly time for the rule to be finalized and to be published in the Federal Register before January 20, Inauguration Day. But this is a significant rule, which means that it has to be in the Federal Register for 60 days before it's effective. It becomes final, and then 60 days later, it becomes effective. So at this point, it's not possible to meet the January 20 date in terms of being effective. They could, if it went into the Federal Register today, it wouldn't be effective until sometime in February. So if it's final but not effective on Inauguration Day, what the incoming administration can do is delay the effective date for a period of time, and they would go into the Federal Register themselves and say, we're going to extend the effective date while we study this rule and consider revisions, or decide that it's a fine rule and we'll let it become effective. Obviously, you would think the Biden administration may not like this rule and probably would want to do something to affect a change. That's what I would expect. Also, if it doesn't become final, if they don't meet at least the deadline of getting it into the Federal Register before January 20, it's very simple for the new administration to come in and withdraw anything that's not in the Federal Register as of that date. Just pull it back, even if it's sitting on the desk at the Federal Register, just waiting to go in. and there always is a couple of days, sometimes several days delay between the time something arrives at the Federal Register and the date that it goes up on the table. So there's a number of ways in which the Biden administration probably will have an opportunity to either revoke or revisit the proxy rule.
Well, I mean, there's just like 2020, there's all these different permutations. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. Well, thanks, Preston. Really appreciate that breakdown. And when we come back, we're going to talk about government funding. We'll talk to more about Preston about that right shortly. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate copays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month. Look, with the uncertainty of the virus and vaccines, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Here's the bottom line. Call to get significant benefits at no additional cost and see if your zip code has coverage with the Give Back benefit. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-924-3920. That's 1-800-924-3920.
Welcome back. We're talking to Preston Rutledge of the Rutledge Policy Group. Preston, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to still be here.
Absolutely. And so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about government shutdown, government funding. This seems to be a ritual every year. We come to the holidays and people are spending and wanting to spend time with their family. Maybe they won't do that this year, but always around this time, we have a question around government funding. What can you tell us here and how it could relate to some of the workings of the Department of Labor?
Well, you're right. It has become something of a ritual. Unfortunately, when I was in the Senate, I remember I was on the floor as a staff or the floor of the Senate on New Year's Eve when the clock struck midnight on the fiscal cliff deal, and it actually didn't get done until about an hour and a half after that. And again, when I first arrived at the Department of Labor in January of 2018, my very first week there, we were staring down another of these deadlines for government funding, and the government actually did shut down for one weekend, and they got it back up and running again. So we're looking at that again here this month in December. There's a number of absolutely must-do things before Congress adjourns for the last time in this Congress. fund the government with an appropriations bill is the absolute minimum. But because of the COVID crisis and because of the economic crisis, there's an enormous amount of pressure to do more than just extend the government's funding operations for a period of time. And this is one of those interesting times when there's actually a group of a bipartisan group of senators and members of Congress that have come up with a spending proposal for relief. It's called relief and not stimulus. By that I mean it's instead of stimulus checks. Remember, we had the $1,200 stimulus checks last spring. They've pulled in their horns a little bit. It's not the $3 trillion bill that the House wanted. It's also not the $500 billion bill the Republicans in the Senate wanted. They came out with around a $900 billion bill, and it would do a number of things until the end of the first quarter of next year. It would include things like healthcare, money for healthcare and testing, contact tracing. It would include unemployment insurance benefits. It would put things that are ending at the end of the year, protections against evictions, student loan deferrals, small business loans, or maybe just outright grants. There's a sense that maybe the loans are not the way to go. I think even Secretary Mnuchin mentioned that what they need are grants, not loans. This is all being discussed behind closed doors, but it's interesting when that bipartisan group came out with their proposal last week, it really did get the negotiators kind of off of the sidelines a little bit. They'd been kind of dug in and in their corners, it was my perspective anyway. And then now, ever since then, there's been a lot of negotiating going on. We don't know how it'll turn out. We don't know if it'll include, I mean, the biggest points of contention have been the desire for money for state and local governments, which Republicans have generally objected to. And then a desire for a shield against litigation liability, which the Democrats have generally objected to. If they can resolve that, either to come to a conclusion that they can do something on a temporary basis or decide to set it aside for now and move forward, that's probably what's going to mean the end of the negotiation. And then we'll know when we see the bill roll out, what's called a continuing resolution. It's called that because it continues the operations of the government. That continuing resolution is a spending bill, and when we see what else is attached to it when that comes, then we'll know what was agreed to and what we're going forward with. But there's a fair amount of certainty that it's going to be something just a little shy of $1 trillion is what most folks are expecting. The spending levels are very important, at least optically for sure. And staying below that $1 trillion mark is probably where things are going to end up. Now, I'll say all those things, and then when the bill finally arrives, it might be completely different. So I'm going out on a limb a little bit here, but these are the things I'm hearing and the things that I'm kind of expecting to see before the government shuts down. And I really do not think this time, again, I'm going to go out on a limb, I really do not think that they're going to let the government shut down this time.
Well, I certainly hope not. But I want to ask you just a couple questions about what the shutdown means for Department of Labor and some of the other enforcement arms. For example, if the government shuts down, does the Department of Labor shut down with it? That's number one. And then maybe, I know this isn't under the purview of Department of Labor, but as a practical matter, do Social Security checks, for example, still go out to recipients? I know you're not part of the Social Security Administration, but just a refresher for me and perhaps the audience is what actually happens if we do get to that point.
Well, think in terms of regular functions and essential functions. Essential functions have to continue. So, for example, at the Department of Labor, there's a group of people known as benefits advisors that are available 24/7 to help people who are in a crisis. Maybe they're at the emergency room and their insurance has been denied and it's an employee benefit plan. Believe it or not, I mean, that's what the 800 number at EBSA is for, the Employee Benefit Security Administration. We actually consider those people essential and they continue working. we may have a case going on in a federal court, and there's a trial or there's a hearing or there's something that we absolutely have to have the investigator there. They move heaven and earth to allow that to continue, things like that. We are a law enforcement agency. If there's a statute of limitations that's about to expire, particularly on a criminal matter, they will find a way to keep working. But the vast majority of the operations are generally put on a pause during the shutdown. The political appointees, however, they will come to work. They don't have the option of not coming to work, and they have to work even if they're not paid, which is fine because everybody's a volunteer if you're a political appointee. As for other agencies, you mentioned the Social Security Administration. I do believe that the checks, those kinds of checks, will continue to go out. But again, it's essential services. The Department of Defense probably has the greatest number of people that would be exempt from the shutdown because of national defense, especially overseas. But that's generally, and it's not a very precise definition. And managers are tasked with coming up right. For example, the deadline is close enough. There's a lot of effort right now, I'm pretty sure, among the career staff and the political appointees, dusting off their government shutdown manual. And there is such a thing. There's what are our essential services during government shutdowns, and which employees will have to keep coming in, and of course they'll be paid. They're probably dusting that off and looking for it right now, because you can't exactly flip a switch and do it on a dime,
right.
in 24 hours notice. So my thinking is that they're prepared, but they're hoping it's not needed.
Well, I think a lot of us, just with all the stresses of 2020, I don't think we need this additional one, and we'd like to see some, I speak for myself, not anybody else. I'd certainly like to see some stimulus for those who need some help, or support for those who need help. Preston, always a pleasure chatting with you. Great to see you as always. Thanks for the civics lesson and a lot more. And we wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season. We look forward to having you back very soon.
Thank you. And here's hoping 2021 is a lot better than 2020 was. So,
amen to that. Thanks, Preston.
Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to? Then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited, and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.